Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to Proper Madness, formerly Beautifully Broken. My name is Sabby, and I give a unique perspective on mental health by providing tools, guidance, and knowledge on how we can better understand ourselves, as well as our past and present experiences, and in doing so, we can help heal our mental health. I get to speak with a variety of individuals from around the world as they share their stories from their journey through their mental wellness so that it helps others stand strong and use their voice. Welcome back, everyone, to Proper Madness. Today I get to sit down with Courtney, who I met through a mutual friend on Instagram, Deb, and she's been on this podcast before. She was very gracious to allow me to interact with Courtney and get to know her story and her journey on mental health and music, and I think it'll be a really fun chat.
Hi, I'm Courtney. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited about this.
I know. I love that you're merging music and mental health. I think it's an important thing to talk about.
Yeah, because I feel like the two go hand in hand together. I know for me, music was a way to express emotions that I couldn't express. Like, I know just listening to something or hearing that those lyrics or the music will help you get those emotions out. So yeah.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
how did music help you on your journey just in life in general? And
Yeah. So I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's funny. I wasn't really allowed to listen to like Spice Girls or anything super raunchy on the radio. So I grew up with like James Taylor and Styx and Sting and all those like old types of music. And I remember like the first cool album I ever got to listen to was like Mariah Carey. And I was like, oh, this is so awesome. But for me, there was just so many sounds that I was introduced to at such a young age that music really became like a safe space for me. And then you kind of, the older you get and like, the more mature you get, you kind of realize that everyone has a story and it's something that people can say through music. And by 5 years old, I was like, I want to do this. Like, anyone who hurts my feelings, I'm writing a song about it. Anytime I fall and like scrape my knee, I'm writing a song about it. I mean, I had some stupid songs I sang around the house, and I begged my dad to take me to singing lessons. And I was that girl that was like doing scales in their bedroom, like all the time. And my parents were like, please go to the car and do your scales. Like, so yeah, I think, music just became like a safe space. And also, as I got older and learned how to write music and play guitar and whatnot, it became a space for me to also share my feelings, not just relate to whoever was singing on the radio or on an album at that point in time. So that's kind of like my journey in a small little way with mental health.
Have there been any like really prominent stories that have produced some pretty powerful? I've listened to a few of your songs. I was listening to a couple today. There was one. Oh God, I can't remember the name. I think it's Angel. I really like that one. What prompted that song? Like, was there a specific experience or?
Yeah. So I got sober in the year 2013, so I'm coming up on 8 years of sobriety. And a huge reason why I drank was because I had a very overactive brain I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder once I got sober, and my whole world fell into place. And that's why the first lyric of that song was, if I got paid for every thought I had, I'd be rich. Because I remember thinking, like, I spend so much time obsessing about stuff. Like, my mom used to call it the washing machine. Like, my washing machine would just be on spin cycle with like intrusive thoughts, and I would spend time compulsing, and drinking was a way to kind of escape from that. And then so I wrote Angel a few years into my sobriety, of like a letter that I would have written to myself at the beginning of sobriety, because I was not to be too dark on this, but like I was at a place where I just was like, I don't want to be here anymore. You know, like
Yeah.
it's just too hard to keep going. Like I don't feel like there's a purpose.
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, I'm going to write this song kind of to myself, but also I felt like other people could relate to the story of like depression's a very real thing, and having those thoughts is a very real thing, and
Hmm.
it does need to be talked about. And so as I'm talking to myself, I'm also talking to people who are struggling with the same thing. So that's kind of how Angel came out, and that's why, you know, I beg you, don't put out a burning flame. That was my way of like, please don't end it. Like it's so beautiful
Yeah.
if you keep going, I promise you. So
Yeah. I really
yeah.
like that. How has your sobriety journey just been? I know that's a rough thing to go through. What was the moment that brought you to go, okay, I need to like get some help?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of like I had isolated myself from everyone. Like I really wasn't close to my family anymore. I had wrecked relationships. I just was by myself drinking and using drugs. And I think that's kind of a point where you go, oh no,
Yeah.
oh no. And other than the fact that my brain was scientifically at the point of like depression.
Yeah.
And I think that that's when I really was like, I need help. Like, I can't do this by myself. And I'd be lying if I said sobriety was like a beautiful, easy journey. There's definitely times where I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm so anxious. Like, you know, it'd be so nice to be a normal person and just have a beer. But the reality is like one beer for me turns into, you know, 6 beers and drugs. And
Hmm.
I just don't like myself when I use and when I drink. And so that was important for me to walk through the
Hmm.
world and the rest of my life with clarity and, you know, with the understanding of why I was doing those things. But even on my worst days of sobriety, it's not as bad as when I was drinking and using. So if anyone like wants to get sober or is thinking about it, I highly, highly recommend. Yeah, it's been a beautiful experience to say the least.
Do you find that there's a difference in were you producing music when you weren't sober compared to when you were? Was there like a difference in what you were producing, do you feel?
It's so funny because I acted like I was working and I acted like I was doing stuff, but I think there's a big thing of like I was talking a big game, but I wasn't actually doing anything, which I feel like is a lot of LA, but who am I to judge?
No,
And
completely agree. Totally agree.
so it was like I was walking the walk and talking the talk, but nothing was actually coming out. So all of this music I have out now has been done in sobriety. It does differ because I think some of the taglines or how you say like the theme of the music switched.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little more, I don't know, I have a fuller understanding of life. So I feel
Yeah.
like things are lyrically deeper than they seem on the surface. And there's a reason for everything in my music. And I didn't really have that before.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
never really
like
took
that.
it seriously. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that a lot. That's because you don't ever know, because you can hear lyrics with, certain music all the time, but you don't know the deeper understanding behind them. And when you do you feel like you want your audience to interpret it like however they do for them in that moment? Or, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you asked about Angel, and the reason why I wrote about a one-winged angel was because I had come home from I was really deep into my using and drinking. I want to say this was back in 2012, and I woke up one morning and I couldn't lift my right arm. And if I lifted it, this is so gross, but my whole scapula would lift off of my back, like the
Oh,
bone.
wow.
And it was actually an autoimmune response to my body physically failing me from drugs and alcohol. And I didn't put two and two together until after I had fully healed. But my mom, I used to look at my mom and be like, what's going on with me? And she was like, you're a beautiful one winged angel and you
Mm-hmm.
can do anything you want to do. And that's like this tagline for me personally behind it. But I want people to listen to the lyrics and be like, oh, this is what like maybe being an impaired angel like
Mhm.
means for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of, I mean, so many artists are good at that, like vaguely speaking, having like
Mhm.
a super deep meaning, but allowing everyone to interpret it. And that's really what I love about music.
Were there any specific artists that helped you get through any of your tougher times throughout your life?
Yeah, people will laugh because I am obsessed with Lana Del Rey. And like Stevie Nicks, just
Mhm.
that whole, I mean, they have similar stories. You know, they drank a bunch, they used a bunch of drugs. I can't speak for their mental health journey or their sobriety journeys, if they have one, but um, Lana Del Rey's Born to Die was like all about her drinking and using. And
Yeah.
I just remember being like, wow, I'm not alone in this world. Cause there's a lot of shame that comes with getting sober. Like,
Mhm.
how could I have lived this way? All of the things that I did. And to kind of have someone speak your language lyrically and musically, that was a really big like gift for me. Someone was
Yeah.
just like, you have to listen to this album. And yeah, so people laugh, but that's why I'm obsessed with her, because I really felt like she understood. But I love that. I love that feeling too. Like I want people to listen to me in the shower or in their bedroom or their car and be like, I get this. Like I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
I love that. I had the exact same thing. Well, people will laugh at this, but with Machine Gun Kelly, sounds weird. But I was listening to one of his songs lately. It just like came on like 2 or 3 years ago. On my car, I was having like a really bad mental health day, and I heard that song and I stopped and I was like, "Oh my god, this is exactly how I feel to a T." And it's
mm,
amazing when that happens when you listen to an artist, and no matter who it is, and you feel like you said, you articulated it really well. Someone else speaks your own language in your mind, because what's in here sometimes like is the hardest thing to express and the hardest thing to convey to people. So yeah, I love that.
yeah, I'm here for Machine Gun Kelly.
Yeah. No, I really like I don't know what it and then his last album just like brought me to tears. I was like, "Oh my god, this is depression in an album." Like I don't know what to
Oh
it's
yeah.
very yeah, it's just very relatable. So, yeah.
Hmm.
Is there anything else that you're working on currently like musically that you've been going through?
Yeah, so I am finishing another EP, which means it's just going to be 4 or 5 songs. Um, and this one is a fun one. Like, I felt like Angel was really dark, and this one's just more of like exploring just like sounds and like fun lyrics. I'm really
Mhm.
into like Maren Morris and country music, so I love when there's just super simple. I'll just tell you, like, she wrote a song called Drunk Girls Don't Cry.
Yeah.
And the first line is like, what you do with trash, you take it out. So why you letting him hang around? And I was like, I love that, like, punny, like crass way of stating stuff lyrically. And so I kind of went from that headspace of like, I just want to see, like, tie in some real stories, but mostly with fantasy, and just see if I can also create this type of crass world.
Mhm.
Because my old music, like White Cadillac and Dear Hollywood, were so much like that, that when she came out with Drunk Girls Don't Cry, I was like, here I go. It just really, that's the thing I love about music too, is like you hear someone else's song and just like something so silly like that can
Mhm.
spawn a whole train of thoughts, and a whole new project. So we're working on it and we're almost done. So I don't have any like release dates yet. I've really just been
Mhm.
sitting on it. And then I'll keep you posted. But that's where
I
I am.
like that. Yeah, I listened to
Yeah.
White Cadillac today, actually, in my car. It's very, very catchy. Like I found myself like tapping the wheel of my car as I was listening to it.
Yeah, I love it.
Um, yeah, I was like, "Oh, this is about a boy. This is about a boy." I
You're not
was
wrong,
like,
isn't it
"No."
always?
Yeah. No, about 90% of the time. Um, but yeah, no, I really like that. With your OCD, I don't know what that's like. Can you explain to me like, how it is for you and what you go through?
Yeah, I love that. This is one of my favorite questions. I just think it's important to talk about, because in movies, we portray it as people who are cleaning or super particular about how their environment looks. And that can be true for some OCD sufferers, absolutely. But I think there's a whole dialogue that's happening of like, I'm so OCD, I need this clean, my OCD. And the reality is like, I'm not a mental health care professional. You may have OCD, but for me, it's a little derogatory because it sounds like you may just have generalized anxiety about your messy room,
Yeah.
Whereas OCD is your brain is basically misfiring uh, signals in your mind that aren't real. So, for example, there's something called harm OCD, which is something that I suffered with the most. OCD tends to attack what you value the most. For me, that's family. So I would get these thoughts of like, well, what if I kill my family? And I know that that's super dark, and I should probably trigger warning before I say that. But those are the kinds of things that OCD gets stuck in your head. And then it gets stuck so many times you worry like, well, what if I do it? Well, what if I go to jail? And it just goes in this whole trajectory. But in order to get rid of those thoughts, people with OCD like myself, we start doing compulsions. So that would be like avoiding your family, avoiding sharp objects, avoiding like, police officers who have, guns around their waist, like all of
Yeah.
these little things I would do compulsion wise. And I mean, it would take up hours of the day because the fear was so real. I mean, my other fear, all of my OCD is really big around death of like when I was little, if I didn't make my bed, my mother was going to die. So it's these very real, terrifying thoughts that our brain doesn't interpret as just a fleeting thought going by. Our brain interprets as it's a real sign of danger. So in order to undo the anxiety, we compulse, but in reality, the compulsion is actually making it worse. And that's why my mom calls it the washing machine. So it's like the thoughts in the washing machine. What if they die? What if they die? What if they die? And instead of just letting the washing machine run its time out, I'm throwing like bleach in there, like I'm compulsing like crazy, and it's making it go even worse. And it takes hours. I mean, when I went for a specific OCD recovery, which I highly recommend if anyone has OCD issues to go to an OCD like therapist who specializes in OCD.
Yeah.
Um, because I had no idea what was going on. I literally thought I was a crazy person that was going to have to
Yeah.
go to the psychiatric unit. And, my whole life has changed. I don't think those thoughts anymore. I definitely still have OCD, but I know when smaller stuff comes up, I know how to handle it. And it's a scary thing to talk about because when you say things around death and murder and suicide or pedophilia, it gets the side eyes. And I think it's like very important that we talk about this stuff because a lot of people are suffering with it and they don't even know what it is. They just think they're crazy. And the reality is that these sociopathic people who are killing and stuff, they're not thinking this way.
Yeah.
They're not worried about the consequences like OCD sufferers are. So I think it's a super important conversation to have, which is why, even though it's dark and it's gruesome, I'm very open about it because I've had so many people come forward on social media. It's been such a great platform being like, I have these thoughts and I thought I was psycho. And
Yeah.
I was like, that's exactly how it feels. Welcome. And you can get through it. Um, so yeah, that's kind of like why I love to talk about OCD is because, compulsions for people are like, if I keep this clean, then maybe this won't happen. But the reality is we're not cleaning for fun. We're cleaning to undo that intrusive, horrible thought that we're
Yeah.
having. And I think that's what's not talked about or shown on TV shows. It's like what's happening up here. People are just seeing like what we're doing outwardly to try to undo the thinking. So
That was a really good way to explain it because I personally I am not to say that I assumed, but I know a couple people who struggle with it, but the way you articulated it made sense. Because you don't it is that like you're thinking about ways to undo your almost like your anxiety in a way, sort of. So it's like it makes a lot. Did you have it growing up as a kid, like your whole life, or did it start at like a certain point?
my earliest memories are like obsessive compulsive memories. Like my brain latches on to whatever it sees. So I remember watching Jungle Book at daycare, and it had quicksand, and I was like, this is it, this is how I'm dying. Like my bed is sinking in quicksand. So every night, you know, my dad would check under my bed, I would check under my bed. I was having family members do compulsions for me. Like I would sing super loud until I fell asleep, just because I was like, I can't fall asleep because my whole bed's going.
Yeah.
And the reality was, is like my little brain could not understand the fact that like there was no quicksand within probably 1,000 miles of my house. But for
Yeah.
me, it was very real. It was under the bed. I was going under. I was never seeing my family again. And back then, OCD and stuff wasn't really talked about or understood. And I still think we're ironing it out. But by the grace of God, like I had a therapist who was like, this sounds like obsessive compulsive disorder. And it takes on so many themes. So harm OCD is just one of them. So people suffer with very real, very terrifying themes. You know, pedophilia, sexual orientation, what if I'm gay, what if I'm not gay? Because like I said, it attacks what you value the most. So I think that's another thing that people don't understand, is that most of the thoughts are absolutely terrifying.
What do you think would help people understand the most, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I think if we talked about more of the stuff that seems scary, more of the stuff that seems taboo, it might help people understand. Because at the end of the day, it's science. It's our brain misfiring information. It's our imagination coming up with these things and getting stuck on loop. Other people have thoughts of like, well, what if I kill so and so? And then they laugh it off and it goes away. What happens for us is we're so scared that that's what we're going to do. It gets stuck and it creates like a whole nother um, like world up here. And so I guess, yeah, if I could change anything about OCD, it would be to just broaden the conversation and the education, and to stop these stereotypes from being put into films and movies and music, and even on Instagram. And I try to not be like the OCD police, because everyone's
Yeah.
entitled to their own experience and their own, you know, way of saying things. But I do try to gently say like, hey, like let's not relate obsessive compulsive disorder to our cleaning, because you know, we're not like, I'm so diabetic or I'm so cancerous, you know, like that would be
Yeah.
horrible if we walked around and
Yeah.
said that stuff. So I think when you put it into different perspective and you really get deep into having conversations with people like this, that's kind of a good stepping off point for people to understand and maybe have more compassion for this is the disorder.
I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How does making and producing music help your OCD? Like, how does that help get you out of your head?
Yeah, I think it's fun to tell stories that aren't terrifying. I think it's a good escapism to just kind of utilize that part of your imagination that OCD might run with, but in a positive way. So it's a place to take thoughts and fairy tales and ideations, whether they're terrifying or not, and put it into music and concepts and, you know, a song. And I also think like I talk about it a lot of times. I talk about my brain without actually coming out and saying, my brain is crazy, you know? And I think that's a fun, like, secret, sick game I have of like, you know, you might think this is just a fun honky tonk country song or pop song, but to me, I'm talking about how like insane I am. So it gives me like a good giggle to just kind of like laugh at myself
I
in the
like
best
that.
way possible. Yeah.
Well, you
So
kind of have to like make light of it sometimes. Like, it can't always. I mean, I love dark like humor, and I can get pretty dark with some of the stuff I talk about. But I feel like it needs to be that way. Otherwise, like you said, no one's gonna understand, and people just avoid it. Like, I was talking to someone the other day about trigger warnings. I said sometimes they apply. Sometimes I think it's just avoidance.
yeah,
As just where like I'm like, okay, well, trigger warnings should be used when you really think it's something that's going to be super triggering to someone, not
right, right.
to avoid a more serious conversation. Um, So yeah, I got into a really heated debate about someone with that. I was like, nope, I don't know. There's like a
Yeah.
fine line. Are there any specific songs that you've written that tell a story of your OCD specifically, or is it just intermittent in like all of your songs?
That's so funny because you just like put off my like creative radar. I'm like, ding, 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 I should. No, it's just intermittently. It's funny because one of my coping mechanisms is to kind of, I named my OCD Tammy.
I do that with my anxiety, I
Yeah,
swear.
yeah, yeah. My anything in like my brain, depression, anxiety,
Mhm.
alcoholism, it's all Tammy. So I drizzle Tammy in all of the music, but I'd love to write a song specifically about Tammy.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost like making light of her. I think it's super helpful to have names for like our anxiety and stuff
Oh
because
my God, yeah.
it doesn't define us, like we can
Hmm.
still walk around and Tammy can coexist with us, but we don't have to be Tammy. So
Yeah. No,
yeah.
mine's my anxiety is named Jim. It's an old man, like an old mad scientist that's like trying to like dissect everything. But I think
I
he
love
comes,
that.
oh my God, it's like, and I'll talk to myself either in my head or like in my car, and I'm like, no, Jim, you need to stop. Like, just go back to your science cave, and no, we don't have to solve this. Like, it's
It's like
not.
Dexter. Do you remember that show?
Yes. Oh
He's
my
like
God, yes.
underground. Yeah.
That's exactly what it's like. Oh my God. For me, it's more prominent when I start dating because, like, I have an anxious avoidant attachment style. So I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you know what those are.
Mm-hmm.
So then Jim comes up and I'm like, okay, what the hell? I'm like, no, like, let's just chill out. But I, I write. So for me, that's where I put Jim. I'm like, all right, Jim, you want to solve something? Let's solve like some writing, like write your feelings down. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
But you try not to do it in a judgmental way because then you're judging yourself. So it's like a really weird dynamic to talk to like name certain parts of yourself something different. And it is helpful. It's totally helpful because that way you have a way to address it as opposed to letting it control you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
I feel like Jim and Tammy would get along.
Jim and Tammy would be like best friends for sure. They'd be they'd try to solve the world's problems.
Yeah, the world is in trouble then.
100%.
Yeah, that's funny. I love that, Jim. He's a mad scientist. That's
He
so good.
is, yeah.
Yeah, you were just talking about the anxious attachment. I've
Mm.
read actually so many books about that. And it's funny because there is something called ROCD, which is relationship
Mm.
OCD, that misfires when you're in a relationship and it makes you feel like you are a psycho. And
Feel
instead
like
of
you're describing my life.
well,
So,
instead of behaving outwardly on the ROCD, which would be
mm,
very compulsive of me, of like, I need reassurance all the time, or I need
yeah.
you to tell me this, or what can I get out of you here, or when can I? I've really, really practiced not leaning into those compulsions, but what I
Mhm.
do, I'm not even going to not drop artist names, but I almost write like similarly to people who have those obsessive tendencies with
Mhm.
men or women or whatever they like. And I write songs about that. So I
Mm.
utilize, if that makes sense, I almost make it as if like Tammy's writing the song about
I
men,
like that.
because I don't outwardly toward men behave as Tammy would, but I handle Tammy on my own end, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. I like that
Yeah,
actually. I
yeah.
think I might now you made my creative brain kind of fire off. I may take that for because I do poetry. It's sort of kind of I don't call it poetry. It's like really witty, like one or two liners that are super deep, and then that's really it. Um, but I think I may start doing that with like my dating experiences because I found like it's so like the anxious attachment, right? I was listening to this audio book. God, what is it called? It's an audiobook about the attachments, and I can't for the life of me remember the name. But when I work out in the morning, I'll listen to it and just walk. And it said something that really just grabbed me. It's like, before you start dating anyone, you're completely sane, normal, career focused, very independent, whatever. The second someone else enters that vicinity, it's just chaos, like absolute
Mhm.
emotional chaos. I did at one point think I had relationship OCD, actually, and then I
Mhm.
started learning that it's just, I was just attracting avoidant apart like avoidant I was attracting avoidant partners, and I
Mhm.
have an avoidant anxious attachment type, so just
Yeah.
fueled that even more.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
It's definitely like a fine line with those two. It's a little blocked.
Yeah.
I think the only difference is like between an OCD sufferer and an anxious avoidant
Hmm.
dater is that we're probably spending more time compulsing, trying to get rid of it, where you're like, just hanging out and it just straight up worrying. But I
Yeah,
totally get that.
yeah, no, 100%. Because now that I have a better understanding of what OCD is, I did think that I was like, oh, am I pushing these people away with
Mhm.
emotional outbursts or seeing the worst in them? But it not really. I wasn't physically doing anything. I was just like me sitting in my room, like just going mental.
Mhm.
Um, like analyzing everything that I see, or like every text, like a miss period or
Yep.
whatever. It was
Yep.
just,
Do you
yeah.
feel like there's a stigma that just happens to women?
No, I think that
Okay.
happens. I think that happens to men too, because I dated someone who actually, funnily enough, would do the same thing to me. We were together for 3 years, really
Mm.
nice, good guy. But he was doing almost that behavior outwardly towards me. Like if I responded different or didn't send something the right way, he assumed that I was upset or
Mm.
so I've seen the other side of it firsthand. So I don't think it's just women. I think it can go both ways, um, because I know that there are women who have avoidant attachment styles that are just straight up like,
Yeah.
nope, like not gonna do emotional intimacy, and so so yeah.
See, I love how open and honest you are with this stuff because I really, really feel, and I say this for everything, but the world is just such a dark space at this time that I feel that if we had more conversations about the stuff that's embarrassing or the stuff that's hard to
Hmm.
talk about, there would be more of a forward movement with not just relationships, but people as a whole.
Yeah,
Race, religion, politics, all
everything.
of that stuff. So I think I just want to like say thank you for creating a space that's, so safe and lovely to just talk about, you know, these things.
I'm glad. Yeah, I've been. That's what I try to do, is create a more safe space, because there's just so much, like everything is delicate to a degree, but you need to feel safe enough to discuss it so that it can be talked about and that something can happen from it. Because my hope is that someone listens to this and it helps them create more of a dialogue that maybe they need to create with like a therapist or someone close to them, like anything at all. So yeah, and I know for me, like, music was like a huge part in that, because
Mhm.
like as a kid I was very angsty. Like the music that I listened to, I just recently got into country, actually. Like I
Yeah.
was not a fan, and then I don't know what happened. I started listening to Chris Stapleton, and then that was it. Then I
Yeah. Yeah.
just got super into it. But yeah, I was very angsty. For me, music was my escape, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
or it was my way of just shutting everything out and having a second to almost validate my emotions through someone else. Um, so yeah, it's something that's why I wanted to pair the two together,
Yeah.
music and mental health. Because I was like,
It's
shit, like,
funny you say that because I am not a podcast listener. I turn on Spotify and I listen to music. It's like my drug. But I will tell you, my friend was on a podcast and I was cleaning and listening to his podcast segment because his was on sobriety. And the one that played after was a girl talking about her OCD, just like
Oh,
the way we were
wow.
talking about now. And the interviewer or the person with the podcast was like, um, well, what did you do? And she said, I went to, the John Grayson OCD Treatment Center.
Mhm.
And I felt like my whole world opened up, because the crazy thing was is it wasn't even the same podcast that my friend was doing. It was this totally different, like, random girl. How Spotify just plays like the next thing.
Mhm.
And I immediately looked up the John Grayson Treatment Center. He has free groups for people with OCD. I went and I was like, let's go to two, let's see if like I relate. And it changed my whole world. I mean, I went and I bawled. So the fact that you're doing this, I just want to say, like, that's how my journey in OCD recovery began. Was someone was brave enough to have a podcast and start a conversation about anxiety, depression, OCD,
Mhm.
alcoholism, drug abuse. And I just happened to be some girl cleaning compulsively in her apartment, and this podcast came on. So I'm like, yes, because you just never know. And it just takes
Yeah,
one person, and you
exactly.
change their whole life. So I
A
love it.
100%. That's why I love to get to know people's stories too. Especially like behind having a creative outlet. I feel like that's key because there's so
Yeah.
many people who have a creative side to them, but they don't unlock it, they don't do anything with it sometimes, or they keep it hidden.
Mm-hmm.
I've found that there are quite a lot of, like, my dad did engineering, and he's actually the most creative person ever. And I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea. Like, he helped me come up with Proper Madness as the name, and I was like,
I
Dad,
love
what the
it.
hell? And he doesn't do a single thing that's creative, but um, he has his own outlets, and I feel like everyone has that, like, their own thing that
Yeah.
they use. So yeah, so that's why.
I love that. Yeah. Dads are just so good like that, though.
Oh my god, he's hilarious.
Yeah.
Are you close with your dad and
I'm
your
super close. He
parents? Yeah.
actually majored in engineering, but he's very creative as well.
Mm-hmm.
Plays a 12-string guitar, can, market anything, sell you anything. Like, I'm just like, what is this brain? So when you said that, I was like, our dads would get along. Do you feel like there's like a stigma? I always ask about stigmas because I think it's so fun to debunk them. But like, as a
Mm-hmm.
writer, or as a songwriter, or as a
Mm-hmm.
poet, or whatever, there's I get it more in my industry of like, if you use drugs or if you drink or if you smoke a
Mm.
bunch of weed, you're quote unquote more creative, you're loose,
Yeah.
you're free flowing, you're a free spirit. For
Yeah.
me, I can't do those things. So do you ever feel like you struggle with that fine line of like,
Mm.
writers and poets are crazy and we do drugs and we're
Yeah.
suicidal and this is the only way we create good art?
It was that, I think it was like, there's art in the suffering. I believe that that's what
Mm-hmm.
it was. Someone said that there's art in suffering. And I sat there and I went, you know what? It's weird when I'm in a happy relationship or a happy situation, or I'm just really, like, it's not necessarily a relationship, but just generally feeling really good. Um, I notice that I stop producing as much creative mediums. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my writing isn't as deep, it's not as, like, punchy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
um, Whereas if I'm internally processing something, it's I get more of a reaction out of it. It's weird, but then you wonder, like, do people just enjoy hearing or seeing the pain? You know what I mean? Like, is
Yeah.
there more value in that than the more happy moments, which is interesting to me because I've posted a few little like writing posts of something, of being happy or like loving yourself or just whatever, and I get less of a reaction on those than the one, like, I posted something today that was really deep, and all of a sudden it just, like, I got a lot more activity with it than it would normally would, and I was like, okay, all right, well, I guess, like, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, with, I would say, with drugs and drinking and all of that, I actually, it's funny, I did suffer with that as well in college.
Mm.
I had a big I just went off the deep end because I had a lot of trauma happen to me, and for me, it was like, okay, let's escape to partying and drugs and all that.
Totally.
But I didn't have a creative outlet really.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, writing wasn't really prominent. It was more escaping through that medium or those mediums of drinking and drugs and all that. So, in my opinion, I feel like people almost praise the artists that are a bit more loose and do drugs and or whatever, and there's sort of like this stigma around, well, if you do those things then you can be more creative because your mind's more open. But to me it's like your mind should be open regardless. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like if you're creative, you're creative. To
Yeah.
me, if I went sober for about a year and a half, and then I realized I wasn't technically an addict. I just had bad coping mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
But for everyone, it's different. For me, I was able to go back to drinking and normally, but that's all. I can't do anything else. I'm 30. I was like, nope, my body, no, I just don't want to go back down that rabbit hole ever again.
Right.
Um, but I don't find a difference for me. Like if I smoke a little bit of weed or whatever, the off chance that I ever do, I don't actually feel unmotivated. Like I'm just like, nah, like I want to go to sleep. I just want to take a
Yeah,
nap.
yeah, yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to do anything. So it's interesting to me that there are so many people out there that almost use that as a way to become creative. So I wonder, like, are you creative because you're creative, or are you creative because you have to rely on something to be creative? Then to me, it's like,
Ooh, I love
yeah.
that.
So
People don't
I
talk about it.
no, because you always wonder, like, well, what would happen if you didn't have that crutch?
Mm-hmm.
Could you create and produce otherwise, or would you be overcome by all the things you're avoiding?
Right.
Um, so that's yeah.
That's the thing is like I think a lot of people and in a non-judgmental way just think we
Mm-hmm.
don't talk enough like walk through the world in a avoidance-esque manner. And I
Yeah.
think that's where we get in trouble with like intimacy and not even in a relationship level but just friendship or
Mm-hmm.
conversational. I just think it gets a little dicey because it is like, well, what are you walking around avoiding?
Yeah.
um, because if you're avoiding you, can you let anyone else in?
No,
um
yeah, I like that. I got chills. That's a good one.
well, I'm like, creatively that's what we do, right? We're
Yeah.
sharing a piece of our soul. So I'm like, if I'm not open and available to share, even if it's in a funny like surface level way, I've closed myself off to all other things really at that
Yeah.
point.
Do you
That
feel
makes me
like
sad.
I do? I mean, it is sad because it's like people are just naturally emotionally unavailable sometimes without even knowing it, or they expect people to let them in, but they won't do it the other way around.
Right.
Like, huh, okay, how does that work? Um, but it happens because they don't know that they're emotionally unavailable at all.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's that's the part, that's the whole, I mean, intimacy. I feel like there is an intimacy in music. Like you feel like if an I mean there's like some music where you're like, is this like, what is this? You know what I mean? But like I'd feel like, like Stevie Nicks, um, and Lana Del Rey, Machine Gun Kelly, for God's sake. But like they're sharing these like intimate parts of their pain
Yeah.
with someone else, and letting them in that way. I feel like it's quite vulnerable because there's sometimes when you have those lyrics that dance around certain things, they kind of do, but they still get to a point, right?
Right. Right.
Whereas like the the song that really gets to me with Machine Gun Kelly's Glass House, and there's a line in there where he said he was standing in his kitchen with a knife to his wrist, and like that was it, he was going to do it. And to me
Mm-hmm.
I resonated with that because I've been there so many
Right. Right.
times. So
Mm-hmm.
that made me feel like, oh, like you're letting me in kind of in a weird way. It like opens you up. Like, when you hear that one song on your Spotify playlist, you just kind of hit shuffle and something will come on and you're like, oh no, it's the song. It's the one
Yes.
that just tears you open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is weird, but for me, have you ever heard Monster by Rihanna and Eminem?
Yes. Yeah.
So Eminem, I mean, he has talked openly about having obsessive compulsive disorder. And it's funny
Mm-hmm.
because, I mean, it's not funny, but people hear these songs and they think this guy's like crazy. He needs to be locked up. But for me, I hear those, you know, sexual OCD thoughts, harm OCD thoughts. Like he basically takes what's running through his head and puts it into a song. And it's
Yeah.
horrifying because people then take it literally,
Yeah.
which is fine because if you don't know OCD, you wouldn't know. But I hear like when he talks about his daughter or tying the girl to the bed, like all of those things are like those horrible, horrible thoughts that he's having. And that's why it's called Monsters, because he says like my OCD is talking me in the head, and like I'm just trying to be friends with all these things that are like going on. And for me, that's like my little Machine Gun Kelly song. I'm like, I get it. Like if I put the shit that I had thought about in my head into a song, y'all would probably put me in jail for the rest of my life, you know? And that was exactly people's reaction, was like, don't trust this guy around your wives or your kids. Like,
Yeah.
but in reality, it's like, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But he was open enough to talk about like the thoughts that he was having, and I thought that that was really cool, and like he just didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
See,
God, I keep thinking of things and then they leave.
I also ramble, so I'm so sorry.
No, I enjoy it because there's some totally off topic, but like sometimes I'll interview people and they don't give me anything back. And I'm like, oh. And then I'm like sitting there going, okay, get really creative savvy.
And thanks for tying it back to the music. Like music and mental health, I'm sure not only for me and for you, is a huge part of everyone's life. And you know, art is subjective, and some people relate to things that other people don't, and that's also kind of what I love about it. Like, you know, if you hate my stuff, I don't really care, as long as one person listens to it and has a laugh or has a cry or is like, me too. I love that. And that's really all that art is for me. And it's, you know, I hope that it's a safe space for other people with mental health issues and gets them through one more day. So the fact that you even thought to like tie those two together has been really cool and fun.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well,
yeah.
The last question I have for you is if anyone out there has resonated with anything that you've said that's listening, what would be the advice that you would give them, or what would you want to say to them?
In my first 90 days of sobriety, this woman named Betsy came up to me, and she said, trust the unfolding of your life. And I love that. I wanted to get it like tattooed across my forehead. And I say that because on days when it seemed really dark, whatever goes down must come up, you know, like it's just science. Whatever goes dark must come light. And by just trusting the process and giving yourself time to really work through this stuff and these things, have grace with yourself and just really trust the process and know that like life is going to happen exactly how it's supposed to, and you're right where you're supposed to be. And that sounds so cheesy, but it's just like, I wish people reminded me that more when I'm in the dark, because when you're in those places, I mean, I'm sure you can relate, it feels like that's it, you know, you don't really have any other option. It's totally that knife to the wrist in the kitchen thing, like, and if someone would have told me just hang in there, I think I would have done it a little better, a little more gracefully. Not that we're not entitled to our own experience, but trusting the unfolding of your life really led me to think there's more life to live, you know? And it's, you know, my story to write and your story to write. And we get to have that opportunity as long as we put the knife down, you know, and it's such a beautiful thing. And yeah, so I guess if you resonate, just try. I always say to myself on bad days, make it one more minute, make it one more hour. You know, you're going to bed at 10:30, you've got 6 more hours. Tomorrow's never too late to be brand new day. Yeah, so I guess that's it. That was a long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, I like that. I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you for coming on and being so honest and open, and I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, You have to go through the eye of the storm to see the clear horizon ahead. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next week.